You going to school? Ah!
But that's all. So that's all I got. I mean, if they won't accept the Bible's view, they got to come up with some theory without God, and so they're not about to let that go. But they're missing an awful lot here. I mentioned the flat Earth theory can't explain Antarctica. So an analogy would be that the flat Earth can't explain Antarctica, but it's like the current cosmological theories can only explain Antarctica. They can't explain the rest of the world. It's kind of like that percentage.
And you're gonna fail your big exam because school is
the devil.
Welcome back to Project Nihilist, everyone. Before we dive headfirst down this rabbit hole, I'm going to give Eric 30 seconds to explain why we're here. In the sense of the video, not the grand purpose and whatnot.
Geocentrism was really holding us back, to really think freely. And I think, in fact, it probably was, which is probably right. We should get it back. But so all these modern revolutions really begin by moving the Earth. So that's, if you show that the Earth is moving, that means the scriptures are wrong. And it's, I think, not so much the science of the Bible that bothers modernists. It's the morality of the Bible that bothers, especially the sexual morality.
And she showed me her boobies, and I like them too.
That's what we call an Eric. He's not a flat earther, but he's positive the Earth is the center of the universe, and no one's going to convince him otherwise. Einstein, Hubble, Aries the failure, or the tragedy of Michelson and Morley, it's all moot. Not even Arno and Bob know more about science than Eric Birmingham. And I'm telling you, it's over. Eric's science is strong.
But in order to be able to, debunk the morality, they've got to somehow show there's error, and they usually start with getting rid of geocentrism.
That is hard effing core right there. Smear everyone who says the Earth orbits the sun and call them immoral, Bible-denying sex fiends.
So there were experiments in the 1800s to try to test optically whether the Earth was moving or not. And one of them was this George Airy. He set up this experiment. He decided that if the Earth was moving, that means you should have to tilt your telescope slightly in order to capture the starlight.
There was a time that we thought light propagated on a medium similar to how sound is carried through the air. We now know this to be bullshit because light acts like waves and particles. Aries knew the Earth orbited the sun, and he tried to use this to detect the ether wind. He was unsuccessful, and that's why it's called Aries failure.
Now I think you can hear the bell quite clearly.
But if you had two telescopes, one filled with air and one filled with water, he reasoned that because of refraction, the telescope filled with water should have to be tilted at a slightly different angle. So he set up this experiment to try to figure out, if or how fast the Earth was moving through what they thought was what they called the ether.
Eric just did exactly what a flat earther does and says this experiment was trying to detect the Earth's movement. They're wrong. They're just straight up wrong. It was trying to detect ether drag by using the known movement of the Earth.
And it turned out the telescopes were exactly the same angle, so he could not show that the Earth was moving that way.
You see? You believe it now?
Well, yeah, sure. Why would he make that up?
Dum 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 dum.
I don't understand where these idiots get this stuff from. The hypothesis was if light is carried on an unobserved medium we call the ether, and the Earth changes directions over a year, we should be able to observe the effects. Now, if you're dumb enough, one can deny the Earth moves, but if that's the case, this would have been called Aries success.
And then Michelson Morley set up this other experiment to measure the difference in speed between light going from east to west and west to east.
4 days I've been busting my ass. I haven't learned a goddamn thing.
And so it was expected to get a certain number based on how fast they thought the Earth was going through the ether.
You know why you only have one student? Because you don't know Kung Fu.
Well, they didn't get that number. They typically call it the null result. They didn't get a 0, but they got a much smaller number. Turns out the number they got was the number that would be the speed of the ether as it turns around the Earth in a 24-hour period. So they got a speed, but it wasn't the one they were looking for.
Shout easy play.
Chief, you're not making any sense.
You're right, Major. That was some incoherent babbling. Fun fact, either Mickelson or Morley went to their grave thinking the ether was totally a thing still. Let me read this to you. By this point, the mechanical qualities of the ether had become more and more magical. It had to be a fluid to fill space, but one millions of times more rigid than steel in order to support the high frequency of light waves. It had to be massless and without viscosity, otherwise it would visibly affect the orbits of the planets.
Mind if I shoot up here? Hey, mi casa, su casa. Muchas gracias.
Einstein later admitted that he says, "I have come to believe that the motion of the Earth cannot be detected by any optical experiment." So Einstein was another guy who didn't like biblical morality. He had several mistresses. So he kind of had a reason to keep the Earth moving so that the Bible could be wrong so that he could keep his mistresses. But he realized that these experiments were not showing the right answer. And he kind of figured no experiment would, so he came up with some equations to explain the experiments that would keep the Earth moving.
He's a superstar, and avatars are going to be on him like hose on Santa.
I didn't think it was possible, so I went and checked out that claim. Dude is right. Al was a rock star, and I quote, he often kept more than one on the go. Also, denying Al's kung fu is one hell of an assertion, and I'm sure Eric is going to be nominated any second now for his Nobel Prize.
So that's my explanation of that there. Anyway, so we're getting back to cosmology, but so
I hope this goes without saying, but theories are the gold standard in science. Saying nuh-uh because didn't do shit, and it definitely didn't debunk Einstein.
Telescopes, they just kept building bigger and bigger telescopes. Galileo's telescopes were refractor telescopes, which used lenses.
Far out. This idiot's going to teach us about the history of telescopes, and I'd bet a Coke and a shit-eating grin when it's all said and done, he's going to go, nuh-uh.
But those get really heavy if they get very big, so the bigger ones all had mirrors, reflectors. So in the mid-1700s, the largest reflectors were about 8 inches in diameter.
I know, 8 inches sounds small, but it's the distance from the tip of my thumb to my index finger. Look, telescopes are buckets that capture light and refocus it so we can look at it. But I'm not sure what any of this has to do with anything.
The planet Uranus was discovered at that time, the sexual morality. But by the late 1700s, a guy built a 49-inch mirror, which was pretty big. He could see the stars in the Milky Way.
Duh. All the stars you see with your naked eyes are in the Milky Way.
So at that time, Geocentrism really didn't hold for very long, because by the late 1700s, with this big telescope, they could see the Milky Way, and they thought, well, maybe the middle of the Milky Way galaxy is the middle of the universe.
And yeah, even that idiot thought the Earth was the center of the galaxy and all of the universe. So what's the point?
And they thought, well, maybe the middle of the Milky Way galaxy is the middle of the universe. So this whole idea of heliocentrism didn't even hold very long, because they were pushing things out with these big telescopes.
I mean, just every single thing you just said is wrong. The heliocentric model applies to our solar system and how the planets orbit the sun. Heliocentrism didn't fall on its ass because we learned our solar system is orbiting the galactic center. If your goal is to prove the Bible, just say it was talking about reference frames and voila.
Which is French for, and then I found out.
So in 1908, they had a 60-inch. In 1917, they had a 100-inch. And with the 100-inch, they could see the Andromeda galaxy. So if you're an astronomer, one of the closest galaxies to the Milky Way is the Andromeda galaxy.
And as you can see, the Milky Way is going to crash into the Andromeda galaxy. But don't worry, Jesus is going to come back and cause the apocalypse long before that shit ever happens.
It's the morality of the Bible that bothers, especially the sexual morality. They originally, you can actually see it with your naked eye.
Finding Andromeda under a new moon and very little light pollution looks like a couple of stars. Obviously, we were going to find out about our own galaxy first.
If you're out in a really dark area, you can see it with your naked eye. Originally, it was thought to be a nebula, like gas, but with these bigger telescopes, they could tell it was a galaxy.
I mean, yeah. So what does any of this have to do with Earth not moving, being geocentric and other galaxies and telescopes and Einstein?
So, these bigger telescopes just kept pushing things farther and farther out.
Or we started using bigger telescopes to see things farther away.
In 1923, they thought the Milky Way galaxy was the only thing there was, but, that's kind of hard for us to imagine now, but at that time, that's what they thought.
Shout out to our boy Edwin Hubble, who first photographed the Andromeda galaxy.
Avatars are going to be on him like hose on Santa.
Also at this time, Edwin Hubble discovered this thing they called redshift.
We could shapeshift Lord Desmond's bed.
Which led to the idea of an expanding universe and the Big Bang. I'll explain what that is.
You cut a little hole in his mattress and you stuff sheep dung inside.
So if you look through a telescope at some distant star or galaxy,
These are small, but the ones out there are far away.
And if the light from the galaxy or star is coming through a gas like hydrogen, you can see these spectral lines for hydrogen in the spectrum, the starlight.
I'm Raymond Rodriguez.
And if you look at certain galaxies, these lines get shifted towards the red end of the spectrum.
The ones out there are far away.
More, and that's where the phrase red shift comes from. So these dark lines get shifted to the red.
Fucking dude doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. He's like, the light, it shifts from dark.
And it was assumed, Hubble assumed that it was a velocity effect, kind of like the Doppler effect. So, if you're sitting in a railroad crossing and a train is coming through,
I hear the train a-coming.
You'll hear the sound of the horn increase in pitch as it comes towards you, and then as
it's rolling around a bend,
and then as it going away from you, it'll do it's like that. Anyway,
thing goes brah, 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 on our TVs.
From you, it'll do it's like that. Anyway,
thanks for the science lesson, my guy, but why are you giving it? You don't believe it. You're like, the Earth is geocentric. I mean, and now you're out here talking about relativity and distant galaxies that Hubble observed and shit. Like, what the fuck are we doing here? Why are we here? What the fuck is up?
So he thought that could be explained that in like a Doppler shift of light. So it was assumed that this shift was caused by velocity, and he thought that the stars that were farther away, that were dimmer, seemed to have more of a shift than other stars. So he developed this ratio of velocity to distance, which he called the Hubble constant.
What the fuck is happening right now? Hubble didn't name his own idea. What happened is science failed to disprove it, and then it was named after him in his honor. I mean, you just really don't seem to have a fucking clue what you're talking about. And it's a little frustrating that you're telling other people you know exactly what's going on.
And so if that were correct, that would mean that the universe not only was expanding, but this expansion was accelerating the farther out you got.
Small, far away. Forget it.
So if the universe is expanding, that means in the past it wasn't as big. And so if you extrapolated back far enough, in theory, you could get to a single point, a singularity, and that is basically the essence of the Big Bang Theory.
Let's look at this logically. You're the psychotic, you should have the envelope. I should have the gun.
Is that at some point in the past, everything in the entire universe was like a little tiny dot. Unfortunately, extrapolation doesn't work sometimes, and based on what we're calling the creation framework, you cannot extrapolate back before day 6 of creation because creation was supernatural. Scientific natural laws did not apply to the creation, so really you can only extrapolate back to day 6, and that's when the stars were already out there. So based on that, the Big Bang does not work. So this idea of an expanding universe led people to believe that not only is the universe old, they are assuming now that the Earth or the universe is 13 billion years old based on what they suppose is the distance or the distance in light years to the farthest stars. Actually, with the expansion, they think maybe the universe is like 93 billion light years in diameter.
And it's because of Hubble's constant we can calculate the age of the universe. And yeah, we can see farther than 13.5 billion light years away. Why? Because the universe is expanding.
Those numbers are probably, I think they're way too big. That picture in the upper right there is a picture of the Earth taken from a probe that was out in the far reaches of the solar system. They call it the pale blue dot picture.
I'm not sure why we're talking about V'ger and the tiny blue dot, the picture that it took 10 years after its mission officially ended. And we're just going to jump on to another topic as if he said something irrelevant.
But this whole idea that, that the universe is so huge kind of leads you to believe that the Earth is not so significant. Carl Sagan said, "We find that we live on an insignificant planet of a humdrum star, lost in a galaxy tucked away in some forgotten corner of the universe in which there are far more galaxies than people." So, with these big telescopes, they can see that there are billions and billions of galaxies out there, more galaxies than people, like I said. So unless you're grounded in the truth, knowing that the Earth is in the center, you start to believe that we're kind of lost in space like that. All right, but there are some problems with the redshift. A guy named Helm R.
Yep. Your training is complete, little dessert spoon.
Looked at some of these redshifts, and there's a particular formation called the Stevens Quintet. It's in that image there. You might recognize that image because in the movie It's a Wonderful Life,
Teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right.
there's this picture of stars, and that's actually the constellation that they're showing. This is Stevens Quintet. So that's God talking out of there. But anyway, they looked at the redshift of those galaxies. Those galaxies are relatively close together, but they have different redshifts.
Again, Eric is lying, misunderstanding, or misinformed. The 4 galaxies have similar redshifts, and the 5th one is way closer and has a different redshift. There's no mystery, no contradiction, no conspiracy theory. There were questions a long time ago, but then we invented space telescopes that clear up images by looking at light outside the visible spectrum. What I really want to know is, what does any of this have to do with the Bible?
So if redshift is a velocity and indicates, a distance away, that would suggest that there's something wrong with it, because the galaxies that are close together have different redshifts. If the theory is true, they should have the same redshift, but they don't. So Hal Nart was rewarded for discovering this by being prohibited from using public telescopes. So that did not fit their narrative. They couldn't have that.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
But what he discovered indicated that redshift is probably related to something other than light, or something more, or something other than the velocity. It can be like inherent value, or it's not all velocity. But again, this expansion they talk about is actually faster than the speed of light.
Do not seek the treasure.
Which would make you think there's something wrong with it because, supposedly the speed of light is like the speed limit in the universe.
That shit about another explanation for redshift was dumb. If science was wrong about relativity, do the work, Eric, and show us why we're wrong. We love that shit. But you can't just go with...
Try to explain that it's not that the stars are moving faster than light, it's that the space itself is moving faster than light. I don't quite understand how that saves it all, but anyway.
I mean, this idiot admits his incredulity, bobs his head around and says, I don't know how that saves it.
Super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Our model doesn't need saved, dummy, because it works and it totally makes sense.
But they will admit that if the universe is expanding at an increasing rate, it requires a tremendous amount of energy to do that. Well, they cannot detect that energy. So they say, well, the energy's got to be there. We just can't detect it, so we'll call it dark energy. So they tend to give names to things they don't understand.
Fuck me running. Science is wrong because of Eric's feels. And see, look, the Bible makes so much sense because we aren't fucking theoretical physicists.
Now that would not be acceptable in any other science, like, biology. If you had a theory of biology that only explained 5% of what you saw, you would probably trash that theory.
Of course, Eric doesn't know jack shit about science, and he's like, yeah, fuck it, man. Look, we can all hug this book.
But that's all. So that's all I got. I mean, if they won't accept the Bible's view, they got to come up with some theory without God, and so they're not about to let that go, but they're missing an awful lot here. I mentioned the flat Earth theory can't explain Antarctica. So an analogy would be that the flat Earth can't explain Antarctica, but it's like the current cosmological theories can only explain Antarctica. They can't explain the rest of the world. It's kind of like that percentage.
This is a photo of a flat Earth map, and you see those Roman numerals and that white circle on the inside of them? That's Antarctica, aka the ice wall. I mean, every science thing Eric said nuh-uh to are things flat Earth idiots say. Eric is the one spouting off flat Earth nonsense and pretending science is fake and the Earth is stationary, but he's not a flurf. I guess cosmologists are the fucking flurfs.
But I'll make one other statement that in the geocentric universe, I believe you have to say it's not expanding, because if the geocentric universe was expanding, that would mean the conservation of angular momentum would be violated.
Fucking wow. Eric just pulled that out of his ass and told everybody it was a Snickers bar, and now he's going to move on without any explanation.
So the geocentric universe, I would say, is not expanding either. All right.
Does anything you say make sense?
So that little image in the upper right is kind of the current little model they show of the Big Bang. It started with what they call a singularity, and then a quantum fluctuation in space somehow. So somehow they've got to explain how essentially nothing became something. And of course that violates the first law of thermodynamics.
I wonder what it feels like to fall out of an idiot tree and hit every fucking branch.
So this astronomer Larry Krauss said, we don't understand nothing. He wasn't saying that he didn't understand anything. He said, basically, it's admitting that they don't understand how nothing could become something. So they basically have to ascribe properties to their nothing, which means it's not nothing, it's something. But they don't quite get that.
At this point, I'm almost positive that Eric doesn't have a fucking clue what he's talking about. But he's just one to, sound so smart and tell all these people all the reasons why the Bible is such a super joy feeling, and fuck science because they're flat earthers who think the cosmos is Antarctica.
So nothing exploded into everything is the basic theory.
Your kung fu is not strong.
Even they even admit in the first moment of the Big Bang, they call it the inflation period. It doesn't conform to any laws. They know no known laws would cause that to happen. So, I mean, it's basically a belief system. The Big Bang is a belief system. It's not, the first moments of it, at least, are not based on any natural laws.
That's called projection and is a common tactic theists use to cope with science. See, science has no doctrine, dogma, rituals, idols, and it changes when new information is learned.
And, people like to say, well, the Big Bang and, all the modern theories, we can believe the Bible and the Big Bang, but they cannot both be correct. I mean, so...
At least we agree about something. The Bible isn't a science book. This is a great place to end it. Eric Birmingham regurgitates science. It says, nuh-uh, Bible, and the people in his audience are eating this shit up. Thanks for stopping by. Can't wait to hear from you in the comments section.
Fatality.